Hi, I'm Ron Timmermans, one of the ground and flight instructors with the Beechcraft Bonanza Baron Pilot Training Program. Thanks for joining us today. We're in Lakeland, Florida, where we have a BPT weekend clinic. And I've got a very special guest today that has agreed to visit with us for just a bit. His name you'll recognize, Mark Baker from the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association. Mark is the president and CEO of the organization and a very prolific person who is always looking out for our best interest as pilots and aircraft owners. Mark, thank you, and I appreciate you coming and visiting with us today. Mark's participating in our clinic this weekend and spoke at our dinner last evening and about several different subjects. So, Mark, you've been around aviation a good while, as I recall. How many years have you been flying?
45 years, Ron. It went by like a blink like that, but it certainly has been my most fun thing that I do is actually fly and come out to events like this.
That's great. Well, it's good to have you. So we were just talking a bit ago, and you said you started your flying in Minnesota back in the 70s. Is that correct?
That's right. I went to the University of Minnesota and did a class with Waldo, one of your instructors here. I still fly with Waldo 45 years later, so we got along pretty well. But it was a great beginning. And then I bought a Cessna 150 from a farmer in northern Wisconsin shortly thereafter, and I've owned a lot of airplanes since then.
How many airplanes have you owned, Mark?
I should be certifiable, have the long white sleeves, but over 100 airplanes I've owned, Ron, and probably north of 20 Beechcraft. So I have a lot of flair for the beach models, but I haven't found a bad airplane yet.
That's great. That's great. Over 100 airplanes. I've owned 3, just for the record. So, Mark, you have blown me away as far as aircraft ownership. But that's great. I'm glad you've had that, and I'm glad you're a beach aficionado. That's great. So, from those humble beginnings as a pilot in Minnesota, after you graduated, then you've gone on to a number of avocations and a number of companies and the like. And so you've been at AOPA now. How long have you been at the helm?
9 years this spring.
Wow.
Have been at AOPA. It was one of those calls that came out of nowhere. I was working on a retail deal in California, and I got this call, hey, how'd you like to run a nonprofit? And I said, on purpose? After being a retailer all your life, you don't even want to use that word. And they said, well, it's in aviation. I said, well, if it's AOPA, I'd be really interested. And it happened that really quickly thereafter.
And all of a sudden, there you were.
Yeah, 9 years
Frederick,
later.
Maryland. That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
Well, you've got a large staff there. How many folks that work for AOPA, both at Frederick and elsewhere?
Yeah, the whole company and the organization has about 220 employees.
Wow.
And, this is we have people that are in Alaska, in California, obviously in downtown in DC. We have a good staff in the Frederick, Maryland, which is our main headquarters.
Yeah.
But what they do, the number one thing that they do, take care of members.
Indeed they do. And very well, I might add. I've been an AOPA member since I became a pilot in the early 1970s, and so it's one of those treasured memberships that I have, and they've always been good to me, and I use a lot of the services. And I've had the pleasure of meeting a number of your staff, visited your headquarters. You weren't there that day, but I got a tour of your office in the conference room with the pictures of all those aircraft that you've owned, or some of those aircraft that you've owned, so that's good. Yeah. And you got a great view in your office there out the ramp in Frederick. That's pretty nice.
Sometimes it's a little distracting when you're in a Zoom call lately, and you're looking out at the airport, we've seen that airplane, this airplane come and go, but it is a really unique spot. And the history of AOPA, we are 80.
On a number of things. I'm one of the rusty pilot instructors, so I work with Donnie McKay and Elizabeth Tennyson and some of your staff there. And I've had the opportunity to fly with Tom Haynes and with Bruce, and so a lot of good folks there. And like you said, they're all willing to help the members, which is great. So, Mark, pilots today, whether they're Beechcraft pilots or pilots in general of other aircraft, they've got some concerns, and one of them is as our pilot population ages, we're finding it increasingly difficult to acquire insurance or keep insurance and pay for insurance. What do you know about the future of insurance for pilots today?
Well, it's one of the most challenging issues we have. Is we have a great group of people, and people taking the training here at BPP, are concerned about insurance because they're trying to do the right things by training and do all the other things. That's the number one thing we can do to be safe. And remember, aviation just came through its safest year ever. So congratulations to everybody who's paying attention to doing safe things in aviation. But insurance is one of those issues that's not aligned right now with a great safety record and the cost and availability, particularly for highly experienced pilots, which means over age 70. It's been a challenge to get that done. There's only things I'm going to tell you that it can be done. The biggest thing is don't change your broker, don't change your insurance group if you can, because you want to be sticky with this group that knows you, and then tell them that you're doing training and be proactive about your training and safety, and we can keep you insured for quite a while. It may be liability only, it may be at some point in time a pretty high deductible, but we think we can get that done. The bigger macro in insurance, which has caused this problem, is not caused by general aviation, unfortunately. It's caused by Boeing accident. You know, there's about $1.5 billion in total premiums between the airlines and you and I, and everything in between. And the Boeing accident cost the insurance groups about $3 billion so far. Business interruption, all the other pieces. So the pool's empty. And now the underwriters are being very selective about having no risk and higher premiums because they haven't made money for 2 or 3 years. There's only 11 underwriters in general aviation today. Now, one of the other things that I have to have people understand is a state-by-state issue. There's only 8 states that actually require insurance, so we can't make this a federal issue. So we're working a lot with the states like Indiana, where the Attorney General is writing letters to the underwriters saying you must cover people that live in Indiana. Hopefully it goes from there. But we've got a big challenge. But the number one thing we can do, work with your broker and train.
And train. Well, that's what we do in BP. If we can get insured, that's great, but if we don't have fuel for our airplanes, what's the use, huh?
Well, it's always a little bit interesting to go through the history of fuel, right? So fuel in the 20s and 30s, really right up to the beginning of the war, was a 60 to 80 octane. That was all that was available. One of our war secrets from World War II was we developed 130 octane. And a lot of our aircraft went faster than the enemy aircraft because they had better octanes, which included a big part of lead. Big ingredient in that was lead. The world used avgas right through the 60s and big consumption of avgas. What happened then, of course, we know the jet age happened. The only consumption of avgas with lead in it today is us, general aviation. We're the biggest, unfortunately, user of leaded fuel that puts it in an airborne, kind of condition in the world now. And we want to move away from low lead to no lead. But it's been a challenge. It was easy, it had been solved a long time ago.
Yeah.
We've only burned about 180 million gallons of fuel in this country. It's 4 hours of car gas. So we are really small. And to try and get investments from big refiners at a really small business is hard to do.
Yeah.
The taxpayers funded $40 million of research over the last 10 years. Still so far, no obvious replacement. But there are starting to be some independent entrants like Gammy Fuel, Swift Fuels, that Swift actually today has a 94 octane that works on, it's a no lead fuel, but only works on the low compression engines right now.
So
they're working
not
on
yet for Bonanza and Barron pilots.
Not for good for Bonanza and Barons or anything that's got a 200 horsepower or more.
Yeah.
Think of it that way. And Gammy has a fuel that is approved now for 700 engines. None of the big bores yet, but both of them are trying to get it done that way. There's still a couple of entrants in the PAFI program, Phillips and Shell and a couple others. They're trying to find alternatives to no lead. And I think we all have to stand up and hold up and say, all right, we're going to move away. We have to move away. There's only one place in the world that makes lead, Liverpool, England. That could be a problem. We know that a lot of airports are under a lot of pressure right now. We're having airborne pollutants that have even low lead. And so we've got to keep our whole associations, the whole OEMs, all working toward, and the refineries, toward a solution in a very short period of time, probably in the next 8 or 9 years. We got to move away.
Yeah. So there's no need to try and defend our need and our right to use leaded aviation fuel because there's just no political, there's no solution that's going to result in that.
No, it'd be really hard to be in a position to say we got to continue to defend low lead even though it's this big.
Yeah.
Because we know lead is not good for any of you, and the EPA is going to come out with an endangerment finding probably in the next month or two that shows that no level of lead is acceptable.
Wow.
And so that's going to motivate the industry. We're working with them, the FAA, DOT, and what does a smooth transition, safe transition look like over the next number of years?
So as pilots, whether we're Beechcraft pilots or Cessna or Piper or Cirrus or whatever we're flying, we just need to embrace the change in fuel and do whatever we can to support the industry that is trying to get us to a safer fuel that will be available for us to fly in the future. So I certainly embrace that. Well, Mark, you mentioned that you've flown a number of Beechcraft, and I know you've flown other models as well. Do you personally get type-specific training in the various airplanes that you own at the time?
Sure
and
do.
Is that beneficial, do you think?
You know, I'm a big believer in training. First off, it's fun, and it really is. I mean, you always learn. So I'm a big believer. It's first off fun, social, and what's better than hanging around the airport with people that enjoy what we do?
Exactly.
So safety comes out of that. You know, we know from statistics, the folks that are most at risk don't fly very much. They don't attend safety. They're not reading or part of a type club or a group that knows more about that airplane. They're the ones that we worry about.
Indeed. So it's not going to make you bulletproof to go to training like this, but it certainly is going to increase your chances of remaining a safe pilot and accident-free. And so if you're a Beechcraft pilot, we hope that you'll join us sometime in the not too distant future at a BPT training program or get type-specific training at another place. If you fly another aircraft, go seek out an opportunity to get type-specific training so you can have fun, as Mark said, learn some more about the airplane and become a safer pilot. And we hope you'll join us, and we hope you'll see you again. From Lakeland, Florida, it's been Mark Baker of AOPA and Ron Timmermans with the BPT. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you at a BPT clinic very soon in the future.